Okay, Brand, welcome back to the VIP shoot video with AJ Styles. This is all for you. And AJ, you still hanging in there with me?
Still hanging.
AJ, I'm going to tell you this story because I know that you don't know this story. Okay? I was present at the second show ever of TNA when they did the auditorium in Nashville. AJ, I was not at the first show. Okay. But keep in mind, Jeff and I were talking. We were trying to make it work so he could bring me into TNA. So, AJ, I watched the very first show from my house. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you this, bro, because there's so many misnomers out there about me. AJ, there was a six-man match that night, and it was you, Jerry Lynn, and Low Key against Sasaki, Yang, and Estrada, the Flying Elvises, which I want to take credit was my name, the Flying Elvises, which I actually stole from Triple H and Shawn Michaels in the WWE. They were trying to find a way to use that name when I came over to TNA. I stole it. AJ, to this day, as I sit in this chair, I will never forget that match as long as I live. AJ, when people ask me, Vince, what was the best match ever? So I immediately say Steamboat and Savage. I just do. That was like more of my era. AJ, I never forgot that six-man tag match. I had never seen anything like that in my life. It was the first time I had ever seen you. I never saw you before. And I remember, my next conversation with Jeff, I was like, Jeff, I never saw anything like this before. Having that kind of a match, AJ, on the very first episode, and it was pay-per-view back then for TNA, how did that feel? Kicking off a company now in that fashion, what was that like?
I got to be honest with you. I was more nervous about the top rope because click, calling back. But I was pretty nervous about the ropes being broke. I don't know if you remember this. Oh, you weren't because you weren't there.
I wasn't at the first one, no.
The top rope was broke. So that changed everything in this match we were about to have. And literally the Harris brothers were able to fix it. I don't know how they did it. They did some kind of witchcraft. I don't know how they did it. But and so we weren't sure if we were going to have the top rope. So I wasn't really nervous about the match. I was worried about the ropes. And to be honest with you, I didn't look at it as like we're starting up this brand new company. It's going to be something huge. I looked at it as something like the World Wrestling All-Stars. Like there wasn't much to it. It was just, it may be here today and gone the next. It was one of those things. So I wasn't nervous about it, but I was going to go out there and have the same kind of match I would have on probably an independent show. So nothing changed for me.
Now, AJ, when Jeff is explaining this X division to you, because the X division came from Jeff. I mean, I give Jeff all the credit in the world for that. I know Jeff was a big fan of the X Games, and that's where it came from. So, he told me about the idea. He loved the idea of the X division, and I did too, because people forget back then, extreme sports were huge. Did you grab the concept right away of what this division was supposed to be? And what was your perception of it?
Well, I remember him saying it, it's not about weight limits, it's about no limits was the thing. But the only guys that could pull this off were the cruiserweight kind of looking guys. I mean, so I just understood it as the cruiserweight kind of title. That's basically what it came across to me.
Now, AJ, I've got to ask you this, and you may disagree with this, but I'm telling you this from a fan perspective. You're in these matches and you're a part of these matches. So I'm sure like a lot of these matches run together. But AJ, I got to tell you, having put so much time in TNA through the years, I think a lot of people always say the X division isn't what it used to be. And, it's changed dramatically. And I would agree with that. But AJ, I've got to tell you, the reason why I agree with that, and I want to get your feeling on this, is I feel back then, the days of the asylum. And bro, that next week it was a three-way between you, Jerry Lynn, and Low-Key, and Psychosis, a four-way elimination match. Bro, early on, the bar was set so high with you guys. I don't know how anybody was going to be able to top that through the years. AJ, seriously, do you think that was the greatest moments of the X division? And was it hard to top that going through your career?
I don't know if it was the greatest moment. It was definitely a special moment, especially for me after, winning the X Division title. That was special for me. But, I didn't look at it like that. I think what made the X Division at that time so different is you had Low Key, who would throw these amazing kicks, looked like he was kicking your head off, a super athlete. Jerry Lynn in there, who was a veteran who could do, the cruiserweight style or the heavyweight style. And Psychosis, who, the Mexican style was thrown in there. Then you had AJ Styles, who was just a little bit of everything. At least I tried to be. And I think that's what made us so different. We weren't from the same training school. We were all from different, parts of the country or sometimes the world. So that's what made us so different. Our styles were all different. And I think that's what separated the X Division. And we had some awesome matches back at the Asylum. But, it goes to, as we got, grew, as the X Division grew, there were other guys that came in that fitted that mold. I mean, Amazing Red. I mean, to me, he is the X Division. He is what the X Division should have been. This guy could do anything. He was so quick. He was small, but he knew how to sell at the same time, which is the main component in the X Division style. I think the reason why the X Division started slowing down, definitely because they didn't give it enough attention, but the psychology is still important. You still have to sell. Some people have told me that, they didn't want us to sell as much. They want us to be like a feather. Since we were lighter, that means we don't bump as hard. And so we don't have to sell as long. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to look at it. I think the bigger moves, you got to sell a lot more.
Well, AJ, I want to ask you this because, AJ, as a writer, like I always try to stay in my lane. I always try to stay away from, the nuts and the bolts of a match and the guys laying out the match. I respect it. You guys were wrestlers. I was not a wrestler. I could not sing me telling wrestlers what to do in a wrestling match. So I stayed clear of it. But I want to talk about, AJ, when you're laying out an X Division match with other X Division wrestlers, especially early on, back in the early days. The question I want to ask you, AJ, is, obviously, like you said, back then, psychology wasn't a big part and it was a train wreck. But while you guys are going over these matches, AJ, are you like literally on the spot? Are you trying to not repeat things that you've already done and literally trying to come up with new spots on the fly that the audience might not have seen before? I mean, just walk me through laying out an X Division match.
You gotta understand that a lot of us are working together on the indies, and we're always on the indies. We're always coming up with new stuff. We're always trying to find different ways to get into, whatever a move it might be. So, and we have a formula, especially with three ways. We have come up with a formula that's a lot easier for everybody to deal with. We just plug in this guy and plugging in this guy, and it's good to go. So the main thing for us is if it's just a singles match, well, let's just do, our signature stuff. We'll just find creative ways to get there. In a three-way, it's listed. We got these double team spots that we can do here, and then if the guy's winning, he doesn't need one because he's winning the match. So it was try to find a way to get everybody over. Everybody looks strong. Everybody do their cool stuff, so that we don't get over as this guy or that guy, but we get over as, wow, what a great match. I think that was the formula going into it.
AJ, I have to ask you, when you come up, and bro, I sound like a mark here, and I'm okay with that because I've never asked these questions before, and I'm sure a lot of people want to know, especially with somebody like AJ Styles that, could have arguably been the best in the game. AJ, where does a new move start? Does it start in your head? Does it start in the ring when you're working out with a guy like Jerry Lynn? And how long do you have to go through that move before you're ready to do it in front of people?
It happens at different times. Sometimes it happens when you're laying in bed trying to get to sleep. A move will pop into your head. For me, the Styles Clash came up with my little brother-in-law trying to power bomb his friend on the trampoline. It's little things like that happens a lot of times. It's an accident that happens in the ring that turned out to be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that, always kind of, I've watched other matches, and even though they were trying to get it to a different way, it just kind of, I don't know, just made me think of different ways to get into something else, So I'm always looking at stuff, not necessarily for different moves, but different ways to get to what to the position that I want to get to, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
That makes all the sense in the world. Have you ever come up with just a phenomenal move, on the spot? I mean, during the course of a match?
Well, it's funny. I have a move that I've been doing in Japan called the hollow point. And basically it's a tombstone, but reverse. And the reason why that happened, because I was at an independent show a couple of years ago, and I was going to give the guy the Styles Clash, but he wouldn't let go of my legs. He held on to my legs as if I was going to pile drive him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not how the Styles Clash works. I step over your arms. So I just yanked him up, made sure you're safe, and I tombstoned him. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of one of those moves that was made up on the fly, and I'm using it today.
Now, AJ, I want to ask you a very, very, very important question here, based on my experience, because I'm still trying to learn. There were so many things in the wrestling business, AJ, I didn't understand, and I'm really trying to educate myself now. Now, AJ, from the X division, you went into the heavyweight division, and I believe you won your first TNA title in 2003 in a three-way with Raven and Jeff. Now, AJ, right?
With you.
With me. Well, part of that. I mean, listen, I don't want to take the credit, but my tutelage and guidance, I'm sure had something to do with the victory. But AJ, this is what I want to ask you now, okay? Because AJ, I'm asking you this because a lot of guys couldn't make the transition. They just couldn't make it. You're doing these spectacular X Division deals. And AJ, I want to pat myself on the back for this too, because I want you to understand this. Not only had I never seen you work before, AJ, I wasn't familiar with Jerry Lynn. I didn't know, I know he was Mr. JL in WCW. Bro, I was working for the WWE. I never saw any of that stuff. The minute I saw you and Jerry Lynn, I told Jeff, you got to put these guys in a program together. I mean, I didn't know you guys, and I could not wait to see that program. And I think you and Jerry had a phenomenal program. But AJ, my question is this, and bro, you're still very young now at this point. You're not a KG veteran. You're in the X division. We're seeing all these things we never saw before. All of a sudden now, AJ, you're in the ring with Jeff Jarrett, Raven, heavyweights who are doing it for years and years and years in a much different style than you were doing it. How were you able to adjust so easily when, AJ, I got to tell you, in my experience, I think I'm safe to say that 80% of the guys that started out as X Division wrestlers, whether it was psychology, whatever it was, they couldn't successfully make that move to the heavyweight division.
I honestly think Jerry Lynn had a lot to do with it. He took me under his wing and he taught me about psychology. Christopher Daniels talked to me about wasted movement and stuff like that, and just putting together where it goes, putting together a match that goes smoothly rather than instead of shooting the guy in the ropes. Why don't you just let him sell to the turnbuckle? We're getting to the same place, except he's going to be able to sell a little bit more and gives your time. Gives time for the move to get over. So there were little things like that that were, easy for me to understand. So when I got to the heavyweight side of it, I did do a lot of listening and, just plugged in my moves where I thought they needed it. That's basically it. And I would just sail. That's pretty much it. The one thing that people don't understand about heavyweights, it's not that your style has to change. It's as far as these high flying moves that you do. It's about how much you sell the move as a heavyweight, because the more you sell a move, that means the stronger someone else is. And that's a good thing.
AJ, I want to ask you this question because I never quite understood it from a writing and a booking perspective. AJ, there was a generation after you, in TNA. There were young guys after you in TNA. Now, again, you're 37 years old now. There's some guys that are at that, 30, 32 range, but are a lot younger and they were there for years. AJ, I got to tell you something, because a lot of people, what they like to pin on Vince Russo is Vince Russo doesn't like wrestling, which is absurdity. What I used to try to teach these guys, AJ, is exactly what you just said. There has to be, selling in a match, and there has to be psychology in a match. And AJ, what I always try to tell the younger guys is, you don't want to keep going at that pace, because by 35 years old, your career is going to be over. If you slow down, psychology, pacing, you're going to expand your career. That's how I used to try to explain it to them. But AJ, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of them didn't listen. And I became frustrated with many of them because they had it set in their mind that there was only one way to do this. What was it about you, AJ, that you did understand, and you just used the word 10 seconds ago? I listened. What was it that separated you, where you were wrestling that way, but then you understood there's another way to do this? What was that?
I'll give you an example. When it really dawned on me that it's not about the move, it's where you do it and how you do it. It was a simple plancha, a house show dive on an independent show. Now, on this independent show, these guys are doing crazy things. I believe it may have been in a tournament. I'm not sure. But there's been some crazy things done that night, and I was like, well, there's no reason that I can't top this move. So I'll just try to make it look as pretty as I can. And all I did was a plancha, and it got a huge pop. But it looked graceful, and it looked easy, and that was it. And it dawned on me, like, wait a minute. This is it's not about, the crazy moves. It's how graceful and how easy it looks, and the psychology that we use to get to that move. And as I got older, I realized that the more, if I can make somebody believe that I'm really hurt, if there's a doubt in their mind, then I've got them. So I've really got to sell this move, whatever it is that they're doing to me, to get that response out of them. They may go, oh, I knew he wasn't hurt. But if I've got you for a second, then I've done my job. And that's why it dawned on me that I've got to sell more. I've got to, and the stronger I make my opponent look, especially if I'm winning the match, then the stronger I look as well.
Well, AJ, I've got to ask you this question too. And bro, that's a great answer and a great segue. And again, to me, AJ, this is why I think we still have a relationship. And this is why, this is just my opinion now. This is what separated you from the rest. Because, okay, AJ, now through the ring and through guys like Jerry Lynn, and, bro, you were working a lot with Jeff. You were working a lot with the veterans. Now you're starting to understand the in-ring philosophy. AJ, this is where I give you all the credit in the world, because having worked with you so long, AJ, I know, bro, you were a great, great athlete, okay? Not a natural actor. That's why they put me with you in the first place, because we want to put the belt on AJ, but AJ can't talk. So as we're developing AJ, we're going to let Vince, talk for him. So I was there from the very beginning, AJ, with your early promos. Now, AJ, and I want to talk a lot about this too. Enter Christian Cage. Okay. All of a sudden now, AJ, you're paired with Christian. And week by week by week by week, I'm giving you this material. Okay. There's no fight back. There's no pushback. There's no argument. And AJ, I got to tell you, I'm sitting back and I'm watching this stuff and I'm like, where did this come from? Did he go get acting lessons on his own? Is it because he was comfortable with Cage? But AJ, now this was a whole other facet of AJ Styles that we never saw before. That guys in your spot, AJ, they fought with me tooth and nail on character and stories. And again, I gotta say, your run with Christian was in my opinion the most entertaining thing in TNA's history, period. Bro, talk me through how you were able to do that.
I don't really know what it was. I think we were just having a good time coming up with just the most ridiculous things. And that's what I was trying to do, was how can I be funny right here? In this segment, like Tom Coe and I worked well together because he was the more serious one. And Jay, Christian was trying to lead us. And here's this freaking AJ who's just a goof and just does the dumbest things sometimes. If I could make myself laugh, I figured somebody else would laugh about it. So that's basically what I did. I was just trying to pop you guys and honestly pop myself doing these funny things. And I was having a great time doing it too.
AJ, I got to tell you, you said the key word, because you know what I find, AJ, like, bro, and again, I never mention names or nothing like that. I don't believe in it. But AJ, I think the biggest problems with some guys that don't get over is, and you just said it, they take themselves too seriously. AJ, I used to love when I was a heel on TV in WCW, like in all your Goldberg and all these jacked up guys. Bro, I couldn't wait to take my shirt off. I had the sunken chest and I had the gut. I couldn't wait to do that. And I think there are just some guys that take themselves so seriously. And just the fact that you understood that. And AJ, I don't know how you felt about it. Bro, I loved that Karen stuff.
Oh, I thought it was hilarious. I really did. I thought it was the whole wedding thing with Kurt. It was, to me, it was hilarious. It didn't get much funnier than that, if you ask me. I mean, a lot of people were like, I wanted the serious AJ Styles and blah, blah, blah. But I was happy that I could show another side of AJ Styles it was funny. Kurt Angle did the same thing when he was in WWE, and it was hilarious. So, I was okay with acting like a fool, to be honest with you.
Well, it was. To me, it was the most entertaining stuff we ever did. That, and AJ, I was always curious. How did you and Christian, you had a relationship with Christian when coming in, didn't you?
Not really. No, I didn't.
How were you and him able to gel so well?
I don't know what it is. I looked up to Christian for one, and he was he was a star coming into TNA, and so I looked up to him. And he didn't act like a star, meaning he didn't, say, AJ, wait a minute. He didn't do any of that stuff. He was all about, giving advice and stuff like that. It was a good thing to have him there. And he treated me like a star as well. So it was the things that we come up to. And if I could, and I knew if I could make Christian laugh, then it was funny, So I think that's why we gelled so well together.
Hey, AJ, I want to ask you this. What was it like, both on a personal level and on a professional level, working with Sting for all those years? Because, I knew Sting very well, bro. He thought so highly of you. How was it, being able to have his experience and work with him for all those years?
Well, the first time I wrestled Sting was in the Asylum, and he I was calling a match, and him and I both were, and then he just suggested that I just call most of it, and I was like, whoa, I was a little intimidated by this guy. I mean, this is Sting. This is a guy that I looked up to, and I remember at one point I said, hey, if you want to do a dive, I will catch you. He said, AJ, I'm 45 years old. I said, Sting, I'll catch you. You'll never hit the ground. And he trusted me enough to catch him, and I thought that was cool, but I always looked up to him, but I was always a little, and he may get mad at me for saying this, I was a little bit starstruck,
Hmm.
intimidated almost a little bit because I'm like, this is still Sting. And so, but he was always good to me, even to the point of ribbing me and got me good. So, it was a blessing being around him. It really was. And I knew that I could talk to him. If I had something on my mind, that I was dealing with, that I could talk to him and just to pick his brain and see where he was at too, as far as our faith goes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just enjoyed being around him. I really did.
Yeah. AJ, I want to ask you this, and we're going to talk about this. And you know what, bro? I've never really spoken about this before. So, like, this is the first time I'm going to be speaking about it, and I want to get your comments on it too. Now, obviously, AJ, you're in TNA from day one. You're at that very first show. I'm not even at that very first show. Also, AJ, I want to stop myself, and I want to throw this in, okay, before I get to this next question. AJ, once I became saved in 2004, okay? And I went back into a wrestling locker room. AJ, I got to tell you, all of a sudden, I saw this world differently. You know what I'm saying? Because I changed. That changed my perception of this world. Now, AJ, I'm very curious to what you have to say about this because very few people can answer this for me. AJ, I'm thinking now, I'm all excited about becoming a Christian. This is 2004. So I'm so excited about just professing my faith to everybody, but AJ, not in over the top way. I know how the guys are, and I know how the wrestlers are, and I know, bro, I gotta go through the back door. Okay. So AJ, like that was my approach. Okay, God's got me here, and He wants me to, work within this working environment. Okay, AJ, after a couple of weeks of trying, what was happening was it wasn't working, and it was being more of a negative, and it was taking really away from my newfound belief where I felt that God was telling me, you don't belong here right now. And AJ, if you remember, I left. I left for a couple of years. That's when I did my Ring of Glory and the Christian
Yeah,
shows and everything that you were part of. So I left. But AJ, to this day, like I kick myself in the backside from a Christian point of view, not making a difference and not achieving and doing what maybe it was I was supposed to do. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
I
bro,
do.
I still beat myself up for that because it's almost like, I hate to say this, but I feel like I quit on God. And like my question to you is, AJ, I know what a devoted Christian you are. I mean, down the line, since the first day I met you, how were you able to maintain that during this journey in wrestling? And not only that, AJ, how were you able to get through other wrestlers when I felt that I couldn't?
You know, it was something that I learned in college, to be honest with you, because there was a lot of times where I was shoving it down people's throat, about being a Christian and this is this. But it was a lesson learned. It was almost like I felt the same way in college. I was so frustrated that they didn't trust me and believe me that this is true and what I'm telling them. And so I got frustrated. That was probably part of the reason why I left as well. But I went to summer school, and my roommate was another wrestler who wasn't a believer, but I got him listening to Christian music, and he liked it. It was years later he accepted Christ, and if that was the only reason that I spent $20,000 because it was only half a scholarship for me to go to Anderson College, if that was the reason why I went there, then that was enough. And him and I are still great friends now, probably better friends than we've ever been. Uh, and it may be the same result because I was so excited to know that you accepted Christ. I don't know if you remember this, but I'm pretty sure that I went up to you and we talked about it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and so you can't beat yourself up because of this, because if it wasn't time for you, maybe it was, you just needed to be there. Maybe the fact that you went there, it was enough for someone else to see they needed to change your life, and you have no clue about this.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't beat yourself up about that. I don't think it's you turning on God or, letting him down or anything. He had a plan for everything. So it may not went according to your plan, but it was according to his.
See,
So you can't beat yourself up about that.
It takes a 37-year-old to talk knowledge to a 53-year-old man, AJ, and I thank you for that. And AJ, just so you know, the name of this website is Pyro and Ballyhoo. We've started a Bible study. We're 3 people strong, and we're going to continue it in Pyro and Ballyhoo. I just want you to know that. This is what I never talked about before. I want to bring it up with you because I want to get your personal feelings on this. You're there from day one. You're there the whole time, okay? Eric and Hulk are brought into TNA. Now, AJ, I want to say this because I want to set this up the right way. When the situation broke down with Jeff and Karen and Kurt in TNA, okay, and I get a panic phone call, from Dixie and Dean Broadhead at the time. Vince, we need you to write TV. And Jeff was already gone. I mean, it happened like this. So, by all means, I'm going to do whatever I can. My ultimate goal, and I was working with Conway, it was me and Conway, that was it. My ultimate goal was we need to put the focus on these younger guys. And I remember, AJ, immediately, like we put the title back on you, and you were the champion. In that time frame, it was only about 3 months. Now, AJ, I'll be honest with you, and I've said this before, what I am disappointed about was, me and Conway, we were busting our behinds because at the time TNA was running in its tracks, not going anywhere. And I knew we got to start putting these young guys over. We got to make the commitment to this. You got to go with this. You got to start thinking about the future of this company. Little did I know that without my knowledge, Dixie was already talking to Eric and Hulk coming in. So, here me and Conway were working. She already was on another plan. That disappointed me and hurt me. But regardless, I got over it. So Hulk and Eric now come into TNA. From the beginning, from your perspective, and also from the perspective of the boys and the locker room, because the writers don't go there, what was the feeling when that first happened? And after a couple of months, how did you personally feel about it?
Well, I think a lot of us try to look at it in a positive way. At least I did. And I tried to, sway people to think of it in a positive way. Okay, a lot of things that Hulk Hogan has touched has turned to gold. So let's take that in consideration. And that was the biggest. But, shortly after that is when there was talk of changing the ring, which I thought was a big no-no. I thought it was changing the color, changing everything there was, bringing in these, the Nasty Boys and all these other guys that were on a show with Hulk Hogan. And I thought there's no way that that's going to happen. That's just ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. Lo and behold, every bit of those rumors that I heard happened. Mm-hmm. And so immediately I am, I don't know which word I'm looking for, but I was like disappointed mm-hmm. in the fact that we put so much time and so much effort. And I'm talking about the boys in the back, killing ourselves for this company. And here they are just bringing the guys it's not going to do anything. I knew that the rating wasn't going to go up because of the Nasty Boys. The only rating we popped with Hulk Hogan was the first show that he was on. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of, bad feelings. Like, I don't see them here trying to help us. It just seems like the same old thing where guys are coming to this company just to make another paycheck. So I wasn't seeing anything that made me proud to be part of TNA.
AJ, I'll be honest with you. Like, first of all, you got to understand, it was me and Conway at the time, and Ed Ferraro was working with us at the time. Bro, Eric's very first day meeting with us creatively, we had the show written, okay? In front of me, Conway, and Ed, he ripped the show up in front of our eyes and said TNA did not exist until we got here. And, in my mind, AJ, I'm going back to the first match I saw with you, Jerry Lynn, and Low Key, and everything that we had been through. And bro, I didn't say anything because at that point, for me to argue or fight was going to get us, absolutely nowhere. And, here's my take on it, AJ. But I'll tell you, I think the bigger problem lied with TNA. And I'll tell you why. And I think you're going to agree with this. AJ, I believe that, these guys came in with every good intention in the world and really believed, bro, when we went head to head with on Monday night, against Raw, which was a lot of their decision. There's no doubt in my mind that they really and honestly believed and truly believed that we were going to be able to compete with them on that level. Now, during those early stages, AJ, I didn't say anything. Maybe I should, but I knew I had to get along with them. We all had to, get along as a company. So like I kind of went with everything. I think what happened, AJ, is, one of the things that used to bother me early on was, we used to have our production meeting. The production meeting would break off at 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, we would immediately start working with you guys. These guys would disappear and come back at 6 o'clock and then wanting to change things up. And yes, bro, that pissed me off because we were working all day. Then they would just show up. But, I think, AJ, they had every intention of turning the company around and really believe they could. But AJ, if you're with TNA for a long time, there's a TNA way of doing things. And they don't have the resources and they don't have the money and corners have to be cut and sacrifices had to be made. So we all worked within those constraints to put out the best show that we possibly can. I think when Hogan and Bischoff started seeing those constraints and that they didn't have the monetary ability to do what they wanted to do, I think somewhere along the lines, they started giving up. I mean, that's my take on it. But here's where I think, AJ, TNA is at fault. Because I was there and I know. AJ, I think when you're putting a wrestling company together, you got to have your talent budget. You got to have your marketing, advertising, promotion budget, and a schedule. You've got to have a schedule. Every month, this is how much we're spending on marketing, advertising, promotion. We're leaving that alone. We're not touching it. I think what happened during that time was, when the Stings start coming in and when the Bookers start coming in and the Kevins and then Hulk and Eric, the icing on the cake. Well, bro, in order to pay these people, you're taking money away from every other area. So now all of a sudden your marketing dollars are down, your promotional dollars are down, your PR dollars are down to pay these salaries. But basically, bro, like Business 101, it doesn't matter who you have on your roster if people don't know about your show. So like, I feel like at that point in time, that was the biggest mistake the company made by moving money over here and taking the money away from something that was very important.
Here's the thing that I think a lot of people forget. We had our niche audience. We had our million people who are going to watch every week. They were going to watch every week, no matter who was on the show. They're going to watch. And we needed to make that grow. And we were. Mm-hmm. We were growing slowly, but we were growing. And that's a positive. I think they thought that maybe these guys, maybe the Hulk Hogans would just, we're going to start drawing 2s and 3s after Hulk Hogan comes in. And I think you're right. They had good intentions. Mm-hmm. I really do believe that. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they had no idea who the roster was a big problem. Mm-hmm. They wanted me mm-hmm. to dye my hair, bring in Ric Flair, and me be Ric Flair. Mm-hmm. People, our million people knew exactly who AJ Styles was, mm-hmm. And they didn't want to see him with blonde hair. I don't think it was a problem me being with Ric Flair. I don't think that was a problem at all. In fact, I learned something from it. Mm-hmm. But it definitely wasn't going to change things. They thought that I needed a rub from Ric Flair. That's why they put me with him. But the reality was that Fortune, working with Ric Flair, was so entertaining, they could have went a lot further with that. Mm-hmm. But they mm-hmm. didn't. There were a lot of things. We didn't need all these other guys coming in. We didn't need that. We just needed, a little bit more time, a little more steady growth, and we'd be right where we needed to be in the first place. Monday nights, a lot of people, I knew it was going to be a mistake. You didn't know until we tried. Mm-hmm. So I'm okay with the fact that we mm-hmm. tried. At least we tried. Mm-hmm. And, we went back to Thursday nights, which is fine. We figured it out. But we had spent too much money by then. And there was guys making too much. I don't know if Hogan got paid by Spike and TNA, but you're right. He gave up. I saw it in his eyes that every time he came, he didn't want to be there. I don't know if he was embarrassed because he never said a word about TNA when he worked there on any show that he was ever on.
Yeah, you know, AJ, I think it all goes back to this, and I say this all the time, AJ. And again, I say this based on my experience. First of all, I say it every time I get the opportunity. As a human being and as a person, I love Dixie Carter. I will always have Dixie's back no matter what. Bro, Dixie can shoot me with a bullet between the eyes and I'd have her back because as a human being, I think very highly of her. Bro, I think Dixie has a huge heart. What the problem was, I think, throughout the history of TNA, and I'd like to hear what you think the shortcoming was. In my working with Dixie, AJ, I don't know if it was a woman thing because, bro, I never worked with a woman before in that capacity. With a woman having that much power, I never worked with a woman. But, bro, her biggest shortcoming was she could never make a decision. So what she would do, AJ, is she would keep bringing in all these other people to make the decisions for her. Well, AJ, what happens is, while you're bringing in all these other people, every time you bring in all these other people, they have a different way of wanting to do things. So now the direction of the company is constantly changing, from Jeff Jarrett to Vince Russo to Eric Bischoff to Bruce Pritchard to John Gaborik. The direction of the company is forever changing because a leader finds it difficult to make decisions. And AJ, I just sit here and I think about, can you imagine if TNA would have just stayed the course from day one? I know without a shadow of a doubt, it would not be going through any of what it's going through now. We lost our Spike deal. Are we going to get a TNA? Bro, all they had to do was stay the course and have patience. AJ, things don't happen overnight in professional wrestling. Things happen over long periods of time. To me, that's what destroyed the company from day one.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely. I mean, I never could understand why Dixie wouldn't trust the people that she could see who were busting their tail to go, hey, AJ, what do you think about this? I would love for her if she would just said, hey, what do you think about this guy coming in? I would have told her the truth. We don't need him. He's not going to change anything. I literally loved that company. I had a lot of pride in that company, and I wanted to see it succeed. I would have done nothing. It wasn't about getting AJ Styles over. It was about getting the company over. I thought if I could, if this wrestler over here gets over and is a huge star, then everybody's watching our show. Then everybody can do good business. It isn't about me. It's about, how can TNA make money so that everybody can live well, and not have to get another job, stuff like that. But that never was the case. She didn't trust the people that got her to where she was.
AJ, I wrote an article 5 days ago, and my exact quote in the article was, I was with Dixie Carter for over 10 years. AJ, she did not trust me. I don't know what she thought my ulterior motives were or what I wanted to achieve. She didn't trust me for 10 years. AJ, let me ask you this. This is a very interesting question. I want to hear your take on it. What do you think would have happened with TNA if it had never transferred hands from Jeff Jarrett to Dixie Carter?
Well, that's hard to say because Jeff Jarrett didn't have the money that Dixie Carter had, from her dad. So ultimately, TNA would have went out of business without Dixie, without Panda Energy, should I say. So that had to happen. If it hadn't happened, there would have been no TNA. But thank God that it did, that there was an alternative. At least it was an alternative almost up until 2009. I really believe that it was the alternative to WWE.
Yeah.
But that all changed when we started looking like WWE Light.
Yeah.
That all changed. So, the company. To answer your question, there wouldn't have been a company.
Yeah,
Without
that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Now, AJ, I want to ask you this because AJ, I got to, it's funny that you mentioned Sting because I was really at the end of my rope at TNA, and I think it was, 2009, 2010. I mean, basically, she had brought Hulk and Eric in, and then, I brought, Bruce Pritchard in because I thought he could help. Next thing I know, Bruce is positioning himself and he's my boss. So now, me, Eric, Bruce, everybody's writing the television. And AJ, I knew this was horrible for the company. There's too many chefs. Somebody needs to bow out of this. And it was me. I took my ball and I went home for argument's sake. Okay. AJ, this is, again, I'm not telling you this because you're on the show. I'm telling you this as a shoot. Now, I went home, AJ. It was too painful for me to watch wrestling anymore. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be working with you guys, you and Bobby and James and Abyss and all those guys. It broke my freaking heart. So I couldn't watch the show anymore. So, I went home, dealt with my depression, all that crap, yada, yada, yada. Finally, about 10 months ago, John Gaborik reaches out to me. They want me to be a consultant. Typical TNA fashion. Nobody can know Vince. It's all a little secret, which was ridiculous from the get-go. Never, I don't care about that. I want to get to my point. So now I got to start watching the show. Okay? Now, AJ, you got to remember, I went through a 10-year journey with you. I saw bro, from the first match to your program with Jerry Lynn to, bro, remember when me and you were Freddy Krueger and Jason and Don West wanted to beat the crap out of me? Okay. Bro, the whole gamut. Christian Cage, the blonde hair, the whole thing, right? Bro, I put on the show and this freaking AJ comes out. Bro, you're more over than I'd ever seen you over through all that. You're coming out with this look and this beard and the people are going crazy. And bro, that's where everybody says, oh, Vince Russo likes to give himself credit for everything. Bro, you were more over than I ever saw you in my life. You were freaking over. And bro, I sat back and, my first feeling is like, good for freaking AJ. But then it's like, holy, who is this guy? So AJ, now I start, I start consulting at your tail end. And I start consulting at a time when they don't want to renew the contract. Now, AJ, you got to understand, I'm so trained with TNA. I understand everything is dollars and cents. I get everything is dollars and cents because they learned their lesson with Hogan. They learned their lesson 100 times over. But now you've got the most over guy on the roster. He is the most over guy in your company right now. You know what you were paying those other guys. How do you not pay the guy who was only here from day one, but is now more over than ever? And bro, that's what boggled my mind more than anything. How do you take such an over talent and write them off your show when your show's struggling to begin with? AJ, what happened during that process? Because I really do want to understand.
Basically they wanted to cut my contract in half, and just a lot of weird things about it. Had they offered me even what I was making, I probably would still be there, but that wasn't the case. There's a lot of constrictions that weren't on my last contract, and I couldn't understand that because I never got in trouble. I was, I felt like I was an ambassador for TNA, that I was the guy that, the TNA guy. So I couldn't understand what I did wrong for them to offer me something so ridiculous. And it was weird. It didn't make any sense because they're putting the belt on me. I don't even I'm on an extension and they put the belt on me. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. So surely they're going to, find a way to make this work out. I just assumed. And it never did. Like, it was just to the point where John called me and said, hey, we're going to shoot you a contract. I shot him one back. he said, well, we can't do that. And I said, well, okay then. He said, all right, we're going to book you on a show so you can drop the strap. I said, okay.
Did you have a relationship with John up to that point, AJ?
Not at all. I mean, I didn't know the guy that well. You know, I just heard rumors of what he used to do. So again, it was a guy that seemed like he was coming in, not really qualified for the position that he was put in.
Yeah.
Didn't really know the talent. He came in and, did well at making people feel like he was going to try to do his position as good as he could.
Now, AJ, when I got in there, and again, you were finishing up, I was consulting during that, crazy stuff with Magnus and stuff. I was at home watching the shows and everything. And, John had told me on numerous occasions when I kept asking him, he kept saying, we offered AJ a good deal. Now, AJ, when you say, here's what I got to ask you, because I want to make this clear. When you say they cut your money in half, is that legit?
I'm being serious. I'll give them. Maybe they cut it by 40%. That's the best I can do.
Okay, but what about the 10 years of tenure that you put in? Did you not earn the money up to that point, and then you should have gotten a pay raise?
That's exactly how it should have been, but that's not how it went at all. And for them to say, and that really, it makes me mad to hear them say, we offered AJ a fair contract. They knew they were not offering me it. It was fair to them, I guess, but not fair to me. It was terrible. It wasn't.
I got to tell you something, AJ. I want to see how you feel about this, okay? Because again, you know how I said a couple of minutes ago, Dixie can't make decisions. I know, AJ, when I finished up with TNA, I know working for Dixie for, a dozen years, she turned around to John and said, John, you make the decision. Then when John made his decision on me, and I emailed Dixie, bro, of course she played the old, she knew nothing about it. She hadn't talked to, okay, I've been through that a million times. But here's a question I want to ask you, bro, because again, AJ, it's so much to your credit. Now, she couldn't make the decision on AJ Styles. And would you agree with me on this? There's no way in the world Dixie Carter wanted you to leave TNA. Would you?
At the end of the day, she makes the decision. Because I will say this: I sat in this room that I'm in right now, and had a conversation with John and how negotiations are supposed to work. You go low, I go high. We meet in the middle. That's how it works. But he went on to tell me that TNA had been horribly mismanaged. I agreed with him, but I told him that I haven't horribly mismanaged my money, and that if it didn't work out, it didn't work out.
Now, AJ, let me ask you this. Again, to me, it goes back to, I don't believe for a second Dixie Carter wanted AJ Styles to leave. I don't believe that for a second. She doesn't believe that for a second. John Gaboric was first starting. She let him make the decision. Now, there's no doubt in my mind, AJ, John Gaboric, much like Eric and Hulk, they don't know AJ. He doesn't know AJ Styles. He doesn't know the person and the heart and soul of AJ Styles. How much of that, AJ, do you think John, in John's mind now, from a negotiating standpoint, I'm going to lowball AJ. Where's AJ going to be able to go? And he's going to come crawling back on his hands and feet, begging for that contract.
Are you getting me fired up right now? You understand that? Because that's exactly what happened. I guarantee you, he called someone at WWE, said, does he have a shot? They said, no, he doesn't. Don't even worry about it. I'm going to lowball him. I'm going to give him, I'm not going to give him what he wants. In fact, Dixie Carter, when we talked about, I'm not coming back, she called me, asked me to talk to John. I texted him. I gave him a call. Couldn't get in touch with him for 3 days. I said, I'm not calling him. So I know what's going on. He's playing that game with me as if I'm not important. That's fine. We can deal with that. We went on to talk about the negotiations 3 days later, and we got nowhere. John started, I don't know John. He seems like a good guy, but I could tell something was going on because he's getting too friendly with me. He was just overly nice. You know, when I knew that I had my last match on the show, when I walked back to the curtain, he was the first one to greet me there with a hug. And I was like, this is weird. Because my two buddies, my two best friends, Frankie and Chris, were sitting there waiting on me because they knew. And I gave them the hug, that I wanted to, it was really weird to get one from John. To hug my best friends was awesome. But they played that game throughout. I guarantee you that's why he lowballed me, because he thought I had nowhere else to go.
Mm-hmm.
And
AJ, here's the way I look at it. Bro, wrestling is wrestling, and on many different levels, AJ. You and I know it's a hard business. But bro, sometimes there's such a thing as doing the right thing. Okay. You put 10 years into that company. You were through it all. Listen, if they could only afford X amount of dollars, okay, then turn around and say, AJ, listen, this is what we can afford. How many dates will you work for this money? And AJ, outside of those dates, if you want to go work Japan and you want to go work AAA and you want to go work Ring of Honor to support your family, then you go ahead and do that, because this is all we can afford. I don't know, AJ, why they wouldn't have taken that philosophy, in doing the right thing for a guy that was here longer than anybody. Be honest. Listen, this is how much we have. How much of AJ does this buy us? That's it. Be honest.
If they would have done that, it would have made me feel so much better and made it so much harder to leave. But they didn't. They just beat around the bush and just made me feel like as if I wasn't important to them. And so that's the way I took it.
AJ, you know what I say about this business all along, and I think you'll agree with this. And AJ, it's not about business. It's as far as being a human being. Bro, all people want at the end of the day is to feel appreciated. Feeling appreciated, bro, is more than anybody can pay you. And AJ, here's the thing that boggles my mind. Appreciating somebody is free. It doesn't cost you a dime. It's absolutely free. And as human beings, we just want to be appreciated. But yet, bro, that's just so hard for some people, and it boggles my mind.
I know I'm jumping ahead right here, but let me tell you about appreciation. As you know, I work for New Japan Pro Wrestling right now.
Right.
During the G1 tournament, which is the biggest tournament of the year and most grueling, for no apparent reason whatsoever, they just hand me an envelope with a little bit of cash in it. And it's not a lot of cash, but it's more than, it's something I didn't have before. And they had no reason giving me other than the fact to say, hey, man, we appreciate you working hard for us. And that goes a long ways with me.
AJ, do you know during the Attitude Era, very, very early on in the Attitude Era too, bro, this is no joke. This is the difference, AJ. This is why people are successful and people aren't. Bro, I was in an elevator with Vince McMahon, okay? In an elevator. Bro, Vince, by the way, I have something for you. Takes a envelope out of his pocket and hands it to me. I get off of the elevator. AJ, at that age in my life, it was more zeros than I had ever seen in my life. And this was Vince McMahon, who I was bowing at his feet and just thrilled to be learning from him. I would have paid him. But bro, it's things like that that make people successful in business. It all comes down to the human being and the individual.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. They just want to be appreciated.
And AJ, I'm going to say this too, because I'm going to let the cat out of the bag, because you're not saying this. I'm saying this. And I don't care. I know they contacted you to go back and work there again like nothing had ever happened. How did you feel about that? I just let the cat out of the bag. That's going to be headlines
you really
tomorrow,
did.
AJ.
Just so you know, it wasn't me who let it out.
It was me.
I said I wasn't going to
Russo.
say a word
I said
about this. It was confidential, but since you brung it up, I said, basically told him, I said, listen, New Japan hates you guys. And I'm not even going to I'm not going to screw this up.
Right,
I appreciate what they're doing.
because yeah, exactly, AJ. You're looking at the way New Japan is treated. They're treating AJ Styles like he deserves to be treated.
That's that. I mean, that's it. And plus, they were only going to pay me what I was making on the independents anyway. So, but regardless, I would not have went there because I'm a New Japan guy now. That's a fact. I'm not going anywhere. I love these guys. They treat me like $1,000,000 with a lot of respect. I just did the show in Sumo Arena where we did 12,000 people. The day before, I think TNA did Bound for Glory. They may have done 2,000. We did 12,000. I was the main event of that show, defending the IWGP title, the heavyweight title. Lost it, but at the end of the day, it was a great match, and that's all I really care about is that people want to come back and see that match happen again.
Do you know, AJ, if I was managing you for that particular match, you would have never lost the belt. That's a story for another time. AJ, how is it though now? I mean, I just saw your oldest son, AJ, there, and now your boys are grown up. But how is it, AJ? I mean, having to leave for Japan and now probably being away from home a little bit more than you were before with TNA. How's that on you?
It's rough because I'm missing some important football games right now.
Now you're not talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. You're talking about your boys, right?
Yeah, I can catch Georgia on TV. I can't catch my son. But the good thing is that there's this great thing called Huddle, and literally my son had a game on Saturday, and on Sunday in Japan I was watching it on my iPhone. So that's a blessing. But to not be there is killing me because there's something about a dad being there to watch their son. Because I had my dad there. There's one thing I can say about my dad. He would not ever miss a game. And, unfortunately, I'm having to miss games right now, and it's ripping me apart. Last year, my son, I this may be a long story, and I hope you're prepared for it.
Absolutely.
But I got to tell you because it inspires me to be brave, I guess you could say. My son last year played on a team that won the Super Bowl. And that doesn't seem much, but there's 26 teams in this football league, and it's pretty big deal for him. But he got hurt in maybe the first or second quarter to the point where it bent his back real far back, and it really hurt him, scared him. And my son's not a big kid, but he has a huge presence on the football team. I called him. His mother called me. I'm in Japan. You got to talk to AJ. He's hurt. He's scared. You might want to talk to him. So I talked to him on the phone and said, "Hey, buddy, I know you're hurt and I know you're scared, and I've done it before. I've done it in a wrestling match, and it is scary. As a 27-year-old man, I hurt my back the same way, and it scared me to death. So I can only imagine how he must have felt at that time. But he had his pads off. He wasn't going in the game. It seemed like the team was down. They were losing. So I called him and said, "Listen, they're not going to win without you. You're just a big part of that team, and you need to be out there if you can." I said, "So put your pads on, put your helmet on, go out there for one play. If you can't do it, you come right back out." And he said, "Okay." And he's crying. He has tears. I could tell he's got tears in his eyes, and he's telling me this, but I know he wants to make his dad proud. This is crazy that it's so emotional for me.
Yeah.
But he went back in the game. And the way his mom tells it, that's the moms and dads, everybody stood up and started cheering that AJ runs back onto the field, and that it changed, the whole attitude of the team changed. And he ended up having a big long run. They ended up tying it up, and it went into overtime. AJ ended up making the block that opened up the play to score a touchdown. We win at the end, and I'm so dang proud of him because I know how scared he was to go out there, but he was so brave to go out there and finish what he had started.
Yeah,
it blows my mind because I missed that game.
Yeah,
I missed that game.
AJ, my son Will is 27 years old now, and I missed the first home run he ever hit in Little League, and it has stayed with me to this day. And that's where it's so difficult because as the father and as the husband and the man, you gotta make a living. That's what you have to do. But things like that, bro, they stay with you for a real long time.
A lot of people don't understand it, but there's something about a kid that's brave enough, and it's just a football game, but it was more than that to everybody else, to his teammates. But it was more to me because he was so brave in it doing that. The last game that he played this Saturday, I think I told you this before, he was scared. He was nervous. He was playing his old team, but he was brave enough and went out there and had one of the best games he's had all season. There's some. I believe that brave is just it's used incorrectly. It's kind of like when people say, "Oh, I love Coca-Cola." You don't. That's not. You like Coca-Cola. You don't love it. I love my wife. I love my kids. And brave is something. Oh, you're so brave. When people say it, no, you're brave is when you might get beat, you might get hurt, but you're gonna go and you're scared to death because you don't know what's about to happen, but you go out and do it. Brave is when you're on the front line and you may get killed. Brave should just be used differently.
But also, AJ, let's give credit where credit is due. That has a lot to do with his upbringing. That has a lot to do with who his role model is and who he looked up to growing up. So, I mean, don't sell yourself short. I mean, kids aren't born that way. They follow the path of their role models. And in his case, it's you.
Well, I don't know, man. I learned something from him that day. Yeah. I'm in Japan just talking to him, and then I get the call back until they won the game, and AJ went back in, and I learned something from him that, maybe I should be more brave when it comes to certain things. When it comes to talking to someone, just little things like that, brave enough to do what you're uncomfortable doing. If that makes sense.
That makes all the sense in the world. AJ, I'm going to ask you one last question. I'm going to let you go now. With everything you've accomplished, you're in Japan now. I'm great. I'm glad that's working out. I know you're working a lot with Jeff. Bro, another sidebar, somebody else after 20 years who's not talking to me anymore, and it breaks my freaking heart. But anyway, I know you're working with Jeff, and I know he's starting up his company, and hopefully you'll be a part of that because I'm sure you got a great relationship with him now. But AJ, at this point in your life, 37 years old, bro, which is young in wrestling. What is left for you to accomplish? I mean, is there one thing you haven't done that you still want to do in this business?
I thought about that a lot, and I think there's someone that I want to help out, that I want to mentor, that I want to help train. I want to I don't know if it's starting a school. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I feel like I got so much to offer, and not just in wrestling, but in life. Mm-hmm. That I just want to be able to help somebody else and see them reach their dreams, and at the same time, once they get there, not forget who they are. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to do that for maybe not just one, but a couple of people. I'm not sure how I'm going to go about doing that yet, but. And I was hoping to be retired hopefully by 40, but since I have super sperm, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. But
maybe it's a good thing you're away from home a lot.
Well, that may be the problems that I'm on. But I just want to give back to a business that's been good to me, and be able to share life lessons that I've learned throughout this business. And I think that's something that I want to do, that I want to give back to. And I like I said, I'm not sure where or how I'm going to get there at this moment, but hopefully I'll get the opportunity.
Well, AJ, listen, I want to thank you for coming on a Sunday, giving me your time. AJ, I think the world of you. I'll never forget. I don't even know if you remember this, but I got to tell this story because when I think of AJ Styles, this is the story I remember a bit more than anything because, bro, it's the little things. It's really the little things. AJ, I remember when I lived in Atlanta, Marietta, Georgia, me and my wife, Amy, went to church with you and Wendy. Okay, you invited us to church, bro. I'll never forget it as long as I live. But here's the thing, bro, that I'll never forget more than anything. This is the kind of guy that AJ is, and you wouldn't believe this unless you saw it, okay? AJ, how many people do you still go to that same church?
I don't. I actually go to another one. So.
Okay, but let me ask you this. That church we went to that day, how many people would you say that church sat?
Maybe, I don't know, about 1,000, Yeah, it wasn't huge, something like that.
It was a good
Thousand.
size though, and it was a sold out crowd that day.
Yeah. Oh
It
yeah.
was a
Well,
good
yeah.
church. Now I'm going to set the stage here because we go to church with AJ and Wendy, and bro, I'm hungry. I'm really hungry and I want to eat. So now AJ comes the part where you have to shake your neighbor's hand. Okay, your neighbor's hand, AJ. I'm sitting there with Amy. We shake a couple of hands, and I swear this is a true story. AJ gets up and shakes hands with every single person in that building that day. Bro, you went from one end of the building all the way to the other end and shook hands with everybody in that building. I'm looking at my wife Amy because I'm starving, and I'm saying to myself, is he going to go outside and start shaking hands now? What? But bro, like I got to tell you, when I think about you, like that's the one thing I remember, bro, because there's no cameras, there's no audience, there's no nothing. But AJ Styles didn't want to miss one person that day, and bro, that's how I'll always remember you. And AJ, listen, bro, I'll always love you and respect you as long as I live. Good luck with Annie. Good luck with getting her name. Hope there's room for your tattoo there. And bro, with me, you got a friend for life. If you ever need anything, just let me know.
Thanks, Vince. I really appreciate it. And I enjoy your show, man. I think you're doing a great job. So,
Oh, thanks, man. And listen, good luck with everything, Japan, everything. I mean, you've got the world on a string, and that's the way it should be.
it's been a good year.
Good. All right, AJ. Well, listen, give Wendy my love, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right, man. Take care.